Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources and really try to unpack the most compelling insights.
Exactly.
Today, we're plunging into some pretty intense territory, actually.
Yeah.
We're exploring excerpts from a YouTube transcript you shared with us.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about transhumanism, specifically,
Mm.
looking at the impact of microchips and something the source calls remotely controlled nanobots.
That's right. And our mission in this deep dive is, well, it's quite specific, based purely on this source material you sent over.
Right.
We want to understand how these technologies are described, how they're said to interact with and influence, the human body, the mind,
Self-healing, too, right?
self-healing processes, the immune system, and even what this source refers to as our fundamental nature or essence. It's quite a scope.
Absolutely. And just to be crystal clear, we're sticking strictly to the ideas presented in the source material.
No outside info.
None. We're not adding anything, just exploring the claims made right here in these excerpts.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
First off, the source doesn't present this as just like a single microchip being implanted, does it?
No, that's a really key starting point. The source frames it as a much larger system.
A system.
And it's not necessarily something that's implanted fully formed from day one, according to this view.
Right, because the source suggests this system actually forms inside the body. It builds up kind of gradually over time.
Yes, from gathered nanoparticles. That's the idea presented.
Nanoparticles, okay.
Yeah.
And how does the source say these particles even get into the body?
Well, it's quite specific on that. It mentions breathing them in just from the air,
Okay.
receiving them through injections, and it explicitly includes things like vaccinations in that category.
Right.
And even through the food we eat.
So it's presented as something potentially, well, everywhere in our environment, accumulating over time.
That's the picture painted, yeah. And once these particles are supposedly inside, they're described as incredibly small, naturally.
Makes sense.
But they don't just float around randomly. The source claims they're actually attracted to nerve endings.
Attracted? How?
Yeah, almost like they're drawn to the body's electrical grid,
Yeah.
The source says they follow nerve pathways.
Like wires.
Exactly, like electrical wires, apparently pulled along by the electromagnetic field created by our own nerve impulses.
Wow. Okay. So over time, as these particles gather and follow these nerve paths, they supposedly form an artificial system within the body.
That's the claim. A system that parallels or resembles the natural nervous system.
And this is where the chip comes in then, according to the source.
Precisely. The chip isn't the whole system in this description. Its role is described as amplifying the influence on this nanosystem that's already formed inside.
Amplifying? How?
Well, it reportedly receives signals from external sources, things like TV antennas, mobile towers.
Any device emitting certain frequencies.
That's the idea, and it uses those signals to exert better control over the entire network of particles within the body.
Okay, wow. So just to recap the source's idea, an internal network of particles builds up over time, potentially controlled and amplified by an external chip receiving external signals. That's quite a concept.
It is a complex picture the source paints, definitely.
So how does it say this system then impacts our inner world? Our mind, body, emotions.
Well, one of the strong claims the source makes is that this system isn't just passive. It actively places limitations on the body's memory system.
Limitations on memory, like what?
It suggests memory gets kind of confined, stuck within specific standards or frameworks defined by the system.
And it seems to really latch on to pre-existing patterns based on what you said earlier.
Exactly. The source emphasizes that this system reinforces existing habits and reactions.
Especially strong emotional ones.
Yes, particularly things like fear and aggression. The claim is it makes them even more intense, more dominant than they might have been otherwise.
So it sort of destabilizes your emotional balance.
That's how the source describes it, yeah. It influences and destabilizes the emotional sphere, causing the organism, the body, to function according to a kind of predetermined scheme.
Making it harder to think complexly or feel nuanced things.
Reportedly, yes. It makes more complex use of your internal information processing, subtle feelings, intricate thoughts, much more difficult.
Okay, this brings us to something else the source tackles directly. The idea of subtle bodies. Astral body, mental body.
Right, and it makes a pretty bold statement here. The source claims there are no separate subtle bodies in reality.
No separate bodies. So what are they then?
It calls that whole idea an illusory division, created by the mind. The source's perspective is that there's just one unified energy system or electromagnetic field system.
One unified field.
Yeah. And what we might perceive as distinct mental or emotional bodies are, in this view, simply ways the physical body processes information or manifests reactions.
Like thinking is a process, feeling is a reaction, not separate things.
Exactly. They're just manifestations of the physical body's energy field. And the nanosystem, according to the source, affects these manifestations by fixing certain forms and behaviors, making them rigid, predictable, kind of like solidifying those emotional reaction patterns we just talked about.
Okay, I think I get the source's logic there. It connects to how it describes our personality forming, right? And stereotypes.
Precisely. It talks about structure being formed right down at the cellular level. How nerve cell dendrites, those are the branches that interact, develop specific pathways as neural impulses travel along them again and again.
And the source says this starts really early, influenced by, what was it? Earth's field and parents.
Yeah, Earth's electromagnetic field and parental stereotypes during childhood. These influences supposedly establish those first patterns of thinking and behavior.
And then repetition locks them in.
Exactly. Repeated reactions solidify these pathways. They become the easy paths, the default routes for nerve impulses.
And the source claims this entire process forms what it calls the character, the personality.
And even the artificial intelligence of the person. That's the term used.
Leading to those automatic, predictable reactions.
Yeah.
So if the fear pathway was strongly etched early on, boom, that's the go-to response.
That's the idea. And the nanosystem reportedly steps in here to amplify whatever a person's dominant reaction type is, whether they tend towards emotional, logical, or physical responses.
Why amplify those?
Well, the source suggests the strengthening of pre-existing pathways and stereotypes helps the system integrate the person better with what it terms a template or a player image for that individual.
A player image.
Yeah.
Like in a game.
That's the analogy used, yes. It's like the system takes the existing grooves of your personality and just digs them deeper, making them the main highways for information flow, guided by those external signals.
Wild. Absolutely wild. Okay, so if it could supposedly influence our identity and reactions so deeply, what does the source say about the body's more automatic processes, like self-healing, the immune system?
Yeah, this is another key area the source explores. It points out that the nanosystem, as described, is tuned primarily to external information sources.
Like TV, internet, what other people say.
Right, all that external noise.
But spontaneous self-healing, the source says, comes from somewhere else entirely.
Precisely. It's presented as originating from an internal information source, an impulse from the body's own center, activating information stored deep within the cells themselves.
And the source describes a kind of conflict here, doesn't it? Using an amplitude analogy.
It does. When the nanosystem's external influence is strong, it's like a loud amplitude signal, drowning things out.
And the internal self-healing signal.
That's described as having a quiet amplitude, very subtle.
So the loud external noise just overwhelms the quiet internal signal.
That's the claim. And when that external loud signal dominates, the internal quiet self-healing signal becomes very weak, which, the source says, significantly slows down healing processes.
So if you get sick often,
the body might really struggle to keep up with healing because that internal restorative signal is effectively suppressed, according to this view.
and there's another layer too, isn't there, about negative thoughts.
Yes. The source suggests that amplified negative thoughts and emotions, like the fear and aggression the system supposedly reinforces, are seen as broadcasting via that external influence.
And those negative broadcasts can directly harm the body.
The source claims they can further suppress the body's hormonal and immune systems, hindering healing even more. It's like a double whammy.
Wow. Okay, let's look specifically at the immune response then. How does the source say the immune system reacts to these nanoparticles assembling inside?
Well, it describes these nanoparticle networks as they assemble, being perceived by the body as foreign invaders, as something that shouldn't be there.
Which would trigger immune response, obviously.
Exactly, leading to chronic low-level inflammation, according to the source, because the immune system is constantly trying, maybe subtly, to isolate and remove these particles that are supposedly continually entering or forming. Constant tension.
Yeah. And perhaps most concerningly, the source makes a claim about ongoing technological developments.
What kind of developments?
Chemical structures, other nanotechnologies, specifically designed, it says, to suppress the immune system's activity.
Suppress the immune system. Why would they want to do that?
The reported goal, according to this source, is to prevent rejection and inflammation, to create a system the body doesn't fight against.
Which would then make external control easier.
Supposedly easier, yes.
Nice.
If the body accepts the network, it's potentially more controllable.
Yikes. It also notes something about older individuals, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests they might face greater challenges adapting, possibly experiencing a decline. Their immune systems may already be weaker,
And how might that manifest?
The source suggests things like difficulty recovering from illness, or even processes like dementia.
Dementia, how does that fit in?
Well, the source posits dementia might sometimes be the body's sort of desperate protective attempt to isolate these foreign particles.
Like walling them off? Kind of. But in doing so, it inadvertently disrupts natural, healthy cell connections. That's the hypothetical link presented.
Okay. From the physical body and immune system, the source then kind of zooms out, right? To discuss concepts like DNA and something it calls the essence.
Yes, the essence, which it describes as the energetic player in what it calls this game of life. A bit abstract, but central to its model.
And it claims this whole nanosystem can actually modify our DNA, or something like it.
It says the system is capable of modifying the DNA template or form. And this template, in this view, isn't just biological.
What is it then?
It's seen as a pre-chosen energetic form with inherent limitations, described as the conditions of entry into this game.
The conditions you accept when you or your essence chooses this life.
That's the concept presented. And deep involvement with the nanosystem, the source suggests, could potentially lead to a modified form.
Modified how?
Perhaps with even greater limitations than the original template the essence initially chose.
This really ties into that whole idea of the essence and its intention, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If the essence, the energetic core of a person, desires to forget itself and just dive really deep into the game.
Like maximum immersion.
Yeah. The source says it will readily accept the template, the nanosystem, maybe even chips. It's like choosing the full VR suit, wanting the most intense experience.
But what if the essence wants something else?
Well, conversely, if the essence seeks to find its way out or to remember itself within these limitations, it will interact with the whole system differently.
So the outcome isn't predetermined.
The source states that the degree of modification, how much the system integrates, ultimately depends on the request or the underlying intention of the essence itself.
Okay, so if this is the picture the source paints, this pervasive system potentially influencing body, mind, healing, even our fundamental form, how does it suggest someone might counteract this or regain control?
It's interesting. The source first identifies who might be most susceptible.
Who's that?
Individuals who primarily live according to external factors, rules, other people's opinions, seeking validation from outside.
People lacking personal responsibility.
Essentially, yes. Lacking personal responsibility and trust in their own inner guidance, their intuition. The implication is, if you rely on external validation, you're more open to external influence, like this system.
Okay, so the way to counteract it isn't like an external fix.
Yeah.
A gadget or a pill.
No, not primarily. The method the source discusses comes back to something fundamentally internal.
Which is?
Taking personal responsibility for yourself, full stop.
Responsibility for what, specifically?
For your decisions, your emotions. The source literally says, my emotions are my choice, and your reactions.
Then trusting your gut.
Trusting your internal intuition, yeah. That feeling of, I feel this is right, is presented as absolutely key.
It's about consciously changing your thinking, your reactions. Asking, how does my body really work?
Exactly. But the source really, really zeroes in on developing flexibility. Flexibility in thought and reaction.
Flexibility. Why is that so important, according to the source?
Because flexibility is framed as the mechanism for forming new neural connections, breaking out of those rigid ruts.
Ah, okay. And these new connections do what to the particles?
They reportedly weaken the stability of the nanoparticles, because those particles are supposedly attached to the old, rigid, repetitive pathways formed by ingrained stereotypes and automatic reactions.
So new thoughts, new actions, shake the particles loose.
That's the idea presented. Trying new things, learning new skills, engaging in varied physical activities.
Like dancing, swimming,
Yeah.
changing up your gym routine instead of the same old thing.
Exactly. Those kinds of activities promote the formation of new, flexible neural pathways. And according to the source, that flexibility helps the particles loosen their grip, making them easier to be expelled from the body.
Interesting. It also mentions something about your energy field.
Yeah, the source suggests that becoming internally stronger, more self-aware, actually expands your personal electromagnetic field.
And a stronger field can.
It claims it can then repel or even transform incoming particles, making them easier for the body to deal with or remove altogether.
So removal isn't instant. It's a gradual process rooted in internal change intention, self-awareness.
That's the process described, not a quick fix.
And it specifically dismisses some external solutions, right? Like magnets.
Yes, it's worth noting the source says external things like magnetic filters or standard water purification systems are described as ineffective, especially against certain types of particles.
Ah, yes, it mentions different types. Some attached to nerves, influenced by electromagnetism, like we discussed.
Right. But others are described as more fluid-based, affecting blood cells, lymphocytes, erythrocytes.
And how does the source describe those? It was quite vivid.
It says they act like semi-living worms that embed themselves and alter cell function.
Semi's living worms. It's a striking description from the source, yeah. It also notes that widely available knowledge about how to remove that specific type of particle isn't common yet, not in what it calls the energy information field. Okay, looking ahead then. What does the source see coming down the line?
Well, it anticipates that experiments with nanorobots and microchips in medicine will absolutely continue. No surprise there, really.
And things like brain-computer interfaces, controlling things with thought.
It presents those not as some distant future tech, but as older technology that's just becoming more implementable now.
And it sees that as a path towards.
A potential path towards full external control over the body's physiology, according to the source's perspective.
But it contrasts this sharply with the human body itself, doesn't it?
Very sharply. It describes the body as this incredibly advanced, sophisticated technology already, with seemingly infinite potential locked within every single cell.
Far exceeding any external tech.
That's the view.
Yep.
And to understand that potential, the source says you have to amplify the internal impulse, your own inner signal, not the external noise.
It also has that interesting take on personality as a kind of AI.
Yeah, it frames personality, those ingrained stereotypes and reactions, as a type of AI connected to a larger Earth AI, whatever that means exactly in this context.
But it can be changed.
It suggests this personality AI can be reformatted through that internal effort, through developing flexibility, potentially allowing a person to consciously use this collective intelligence rather than just being run by its default programming.
And the motivation behind developing these external control systems.
The source attributes it, rather simply, to the desire for power. The idea that someone always wants to rule everyone.
And it warns against just believing in these systems.
Yes, it sees widespread belief in the inevitability or the overwhelming power of such external control systems as potentially stifling our own internal development.
It also compares a bionic person, someone heavily integrated with this nanosystem, to a standard person. What's the difference according to the source?
It says the subconscious memory, that deeper knowing, is always present in both. But the bionic person, wrapped in the system as another layer of illusion, relies more heavily on the external network.
But the essence still has a say.
Even in that bionic scenario, the source believes the subconscious will still somehow guide the essence towards its chosen path, maybe indirectly, because the essence holds the original intention for this life's game.
One last point, it mentions specific locations where concentrations are higher.
Yes. Finally, the source mentions that nanoparticle concentrations are reportedly higher in certain specific experimental zones.
Whereabouts?
Parts of China, Africa, Indonesia, and South America were named.
Why there? More pollution.
It clarifies it's not necessarily about wider dispersal there, but rather locations where specific research is being conducted, where biological material is being collected to study how the particles distribute in bodies.
So research hotspots, not necessarily that everyone there has more.
Exactly. Dispersal, it claims, is global, but these are hotspots for concentration and study.
So, wow. Okay, we've really taken a deep dive into this source's very specific and, frankly, quite startling view. A pervasive nanosystem building internally, influenced by external signals, impacting everything from our emotional patterns and healing, right up to our DNA template and this concept of essence.
It's a lot to take in.
And the most surprising part, maybe, is the source's idea that the path to counteracting it isn't some external battle, but internal cultivation.
Personal responsibility, flexibility, self-awareness, that's the core message for navigating it.
It certainly presents a complex and provocative vision.
Definitely. And it leaves you, the listener, with a pretty powerful question to consider, doesn't it? Straight from the implications of this source material.
Which is?
In a world where external influence and technological integration are clearly increasing all the time, how do you actively strengthen your connection to your internal source? How do you maintain that sense of autonomy? Not through struggle or fear, which the source suggests feeds the system,
But
through conscious choice and deepening your own self-understanding, just as this source suggests, might actually be the way through.
Something to definitely mull over as you continue your own deep dives.